Good afternoon and welcome to Becoming a Lawyer in Canada. This is the part 2 of a series we've been holding, and we had one with a fantastic list of panelists a year or so ago. Today's own is focusing on the NCA exam tips and the legal research and writing course. And we have a wonderful selection of people to discuss with us as well today. I'm going to invite our president, Cynthia Okafor, to give an introductory speech, and we'll move into the panel.
Thank you, Funto. Once again, welcome to everybody. Welcome to our panelists. Thank you for taking out the time to be here with us, knowing that today is Saturday, and yet you took out the time to be here with us today. So this is much appreciated. So every year, the ITL network tries to provide support and assistance to ITLs at various stages in their licensing process. And this year, we decided to kickstart 2024 with something that we believe will be most beneficial to our members that are in the stage of writing the NCAs and completing the NCA process. So without taking much of our time today, I would also be transferring back to Funto to continue with introduction of our panelists.
Thank you, Cynthia. So today we have Adeoba, the AML lead from Dentons. She's going to be moderating. So she's the one who's going to handle the whole panel. I just wanted to run through the basic structure of today. We're doing this introductions. I'm going to hand over to Ife. We're going to have a welcome address, a welcome introduction to the course. So NCA exam tips and legal research and writing course. And then there are going to be some questions fielded to the people on the panel. After the questions are fielded, then we'll take questions from the floor and then we'll wrap up. We're trying to keep you here for about an hour and not take it too long. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome the moderator of today, Ife Adeoba, onto the stage.
Thank you, Funto, and thank you everyone for having me. Welcome everyone. We're glad to have all of you here. And I would say welcome to all of the panelists as well. I have a really great caliber of panelists here with me, and I'll just introduce them very briefly. We have Deborah Wolfe. Deborah Wolfe is the Executive Director for the NCA, that's the National Committee on Accreditation. Thank you for joining me and joining us, Deborah. We also have Karmen Masson. Karmen is the content manager for CPLED, and CPLED is the Canadian Center for Professional Legal Education. That's CPLED. Thank you, Karmen, for being here. Liran Kandin. Liran is the Executive Director for Lex Professional Development. So thank you, Liran, for being here. We also have Idayat Balogun. Idayat is a Crown Prosecutor, Alberta government, and she's also a criminal law tutor. So thank you, Idayat, for being here. And then last but not the least, we have Vanessa Santaguida. Vanessa is the leader and the, I would say the CEO for NCA Mentor. Thank you, Vanessa, for being here. Okay, so we'll get right into this. The first section of this event will be a presentation by Deborah, and after that presentation, we'll go to panel discussions. So I'll let Deborah just have the floor now.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me to participate in the panel. I don't want to take too much time at the beginning, but I wanted to make sure that everybody had the same understanding of the situation and of the environment within which we're operating. The National Committee on Accreditation is not its own organization. It is an operation and a committee within the Federation of Law Societies of Canada. The Federation of Law Societies of Canada, we call it the Federation, is the national association of the regulatory bodies in our provinces and territories of Canada. There are 14 law societies. So individuals cannot be members of the Federation, but the law societies are. And they ask the Federation to do different activities, tasks, play different roles. And that may be things like going in front of the federal government committees, bringing cases to the Supreme Court of Canada, or in the case of what we're talking about today, the responsibility for evaluating, assessing, and certifying individuals who are educated outside of Canada, or in what we call Canadian civil law programs. So the programs that have a component of civil law that are taught in Quebec and at the University of Ottawa. So the role of the NCA is to do that on behalf of the law societies. And so it's a delegated authority, and that's really important to know. It's a delegated authority, and I am the executive director of the National Committee on Accreditation. And so within that delegated authority, I have the obligation to run the program, to evaluate the people who come forward to the NCA and say, hey, I want to practice law in Canada. And we're that first step before you go to the Law Society. I know that there is sometimes people think that the NCA and the Law Societies are the same thing. We're not. We're separate organizations, and you must get your certificate of qualification from us before you go forward to the Law Societies. The Law Societies will accept 2 credentials. One is a degree from a Federation-approved Canadian common law program. I run that process as well, or a certificate of qualification from the NCA. So we have these 2 separate processes, but they're both based out of the same document. And that document is called the National Requirement for Canadian Common Law Programs. You can find that online. Just Google National Requirement 2018 law, and it will pop up. It's on the Federation website. So the Canadian common law programs are evaluated against the national requirement. And at the NCA, the policies that we use are based absolutely on the national requirement. So when we say that you have to demonstrate competency in Canadian constitutional law, Canadian criminal law, all of the mandatory Canadian subjects, please be assured that everyone graduating from a Canadian program has also had to demonstrate competency in those subjects. Now, we talk about demonstrating competency in the subjects, but sometimes we'll use a shorthand, we'll say assigning exams. But we don't necessarily assign the exams. We say you have to demonstrate competency in these subjects. And if we have to send you back to law school, we'll say you must demonstrate competency through attendance at law school, sometimes at a Canadian law school, often at a common law school, or give you the option of writing our exams. So the letter or the report that you get from us will very clearly lay out whether you have to go to law school, whether you have to do a new credential, which might be a JD, or whether you have the option of writing exams. We're going to talk about exams in a few minutes, but I want to, before we jump into the legal research and writing component, really, the reason why I was talking about the national requirement is that under the national requirement, there are the subjects, Canadian constitutional law, etc. There are skills, and then there's what we call the learning environment. We assess the learning environment at the Canadian law schools by asking questions about the libraries, about the budget, about the professors, etc. For people who are coming from outside of Canada, who earned their education outside of Canada, we use a proxy, and that proxy is approval of the program or the law school by the authority for the legal profession in that jurisdiction. So it might be the American Bar Association in the US, Bar Council of India in India, et cetera, et cetera. In some jurisdictions, there's no accreditation process. But in cases like that, for example, in Nigeria, we will recognize the programs or the law schools that the councils for legal education will recognize. So there's always a way that we're going to be able to tell that your degree is approved or not by the authority for the legal profession in the jurisdiction where you took it. Now, to go back to the national requirement, I mentioned that there's skills, and those skills include problem solving, oral and written legal communications, and legal research. We brought in 2 years ago a mandatory requirement to take a module or to demonstrate competency in Canadian legal research and writing. And that covers off those 2 skills that are listed in the national requirement. Legal research and oral, written legal communication, not oral. We're assuming you get oral communications in your law degree, in your licensing process, or in your practice. Now, the national requirement came into force in 2015. We brought this in 2022 because we were busy doing other things, and we had to figure out a way to evaluate the people who are coming through the NCA for their legal research and writing. And in probably 2019, 2018, we started talking with CPLED about using their module for legal research and writing and tailoring it for the NCAs. Got a little bit slowed down by that thing called the pandemic. I think it affected all of us in so many ways, and it certainly affected the NCA. We actually got fairly distracted for quite a while in moving our exams from handwritten exams to online exams. I can talk about that process if people are curious, but just so you know, it was awful. It was hell. And we're now through it, and things are going quite well with our online exam process. So in 2022, January 2022, we brought in that requirement for Canadian legal research and writing. And it is similar, but not the same, exactly the same as what the Canadian law schools will require you to do. And we don't require demonstration in the NCA of oral competency, but we do from that module for the Canadian legal research and writing. The feedback from the law societies has been that people who are educated in other jurisdictions certainly may not be familiar with Canadian legal terminology. And of course, the sources of law are different. And so if someone writes their exam and just uses American or English or Indian or Nigerian sources of law, they are not going to, or unlikely to succeed. And so the module on Canadian legal research and writing will help you figure out how to start to do that. I think that's probably everything I need to do at this point. And so I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Deborah, for that context. It's very helpful. I'd love to hear from Karmen now on what that course entails and, just generally what your specific objectives are at CPLED and what it entails.
Sure, thanks, Ife. So I'm going to refer to the Legal Research and Writing course as LRW. The objectives of the course to start with. So we're really looking at starting to begin to help candidates develop their legal research and writing competencies in that Canadian context, as Deborah described, by providing the knowledge of the research and the writing methods, as well as the tools, to take an opportunity to begin taking those methods and actually applying them. Okay, so you're actually applying that knowledge and you're using fact scenarios that you might encounter in practice. Okay, so pretty overarching, right? The benefit also, though, of taking the LRW is around, in an indirect sense, supporting your exam preparation, because the areas of law on the assignments that you're going to do in LRW, they actually align with the areas of law that are covered on the NCA exams. Okay, having said that, I'm going to just back up for a second and say the LRW is not a substantive law training program. So I'll give you an example. Sometimes students come out of LRW and they'll say to us, oh, I wish there would have been more on how to write a contract or how to draft a will. And so the purpose of research and writing, this particular course, is not substantive. It's to provide the underlying skills and competencies that are needed in order to effectively research and write. And I'm going to differentiate here a word. When I say writing skills, I'm going to differentiate them with drafting skills. So, two different things. On the writing side, we will look at some assignments, some examples of things, for example, doing a legal memorandum or a legal brief. I'm going to differentiate that with drafting things like a contract or a will, right? So those are different. So the course is really the basic competencies on research and writing. Now, if we look at the assignments, we can talk a little bit about those. Those are going to help students really at the end of the day to be able to practice analyzing and applying the law. And how does that link up or correlate with your NCA exams? Well, in your NCA exams, you're going to be asked to do analysis. So again, LRW, not the substantive, what constitutional law is or what criminal law is or how to draft a contract. It's the basics that you would be applying really in the critical thinking and the analytical skills.
Karmen, I'm sorry, but I think I want to jump in and ask further question there.
You bet.
And if you don't mind, could you talk about how successful this program has been, in your opinion?
So I think the best way I can answer this question is to talk a little bit about the feedback that we've received, because I can come up with all kinds of opinions, but I would rather share some of the feedback. The course has been going for approximately 2 years. I was looking at the statistics, and what I'm looking at is survey results from students who have completed the program. And I compared beginning of 2023 with kind of the end of the year. And so when I look at things like, we ask students questions like, are you better equipped to conduct legal research after completing the course? So approximately 80% of students consistently, beginning of the year, end of the year, either strongly agreed or agreed with that statement. Have I learned to be a better legal writer after completing the course? Again, around an 80% mark, and consistently between the beginning and the end of the year. So I think some of our numbers, our qualitative data shows that, people are walking away with some really some valuable insights, some tools, and some practical guidance in order to actually go forward and apply those key skills and competencies, whether it be in their NCA exams or at the next step where they're actually going to be entering bar admission programs and then articles, of course. So again, we're kind of at the beginning of the learning process. I'm gonna read a couple of comments that I noted, and I thought, like, these I think are really good demonstrators of what some people see as the successes. So here, I'll read one to you. I like that the course taught me things I didn't learn in law school. Law schools are focused on teaching students theory, so we often are out of touch with practice. This course really helped me prepare for my articling student position. I was asked to prepare a memorandum of law, which was new to me. Furthermore, the research aspect was amazing. The course took me by surprise and provided me with a more solid research and writing foundation in a Canadian context. We get a lot of other feedback around, and I'll be honest, we get a mix of feedback on the issue of assessors giving feedback to students. And when I see the mix, I go, we need to pay attention to that. And we actually are working now on reviewing the assessment process in order to promote consistency amongst our assessors so that we can get, or students can get, similar quantity and quality of feedback. I'm gonna read you one more, Iffy, just because I was just one more success story, because there was a really good one here. I just thought it was a great example.
Right.
Well, here's one. Great course. And this one is every NCA candidate should pursue it before taking their NCA exams. A similar comment, it's good, it must be mandatory for every law student. So I think
yeah, I think that's really great, and it's good to see what people are saying from the surveys and from the feedback. I'd love to hear from Vanessa. Vanessa coaches students on the LRW course, and she sees it firsthand on what the struggles are and all of that. So Vanessa, what are the issues that you see in your interactions with the students?
Yeah, so about a year ago, I was approached by quite a few students who were having some difficulty with the LRW course. Since then, we've gone from providing... Oh, can you hear me?
Go ahead, Vanessa.
There was a glitch there. So since then, we've gone from providing support and guidance in a one-on-one setting to full-blown specialized legal research and writing classes. Students have expressed to me multiple concerns, particularly that they find there's a disconnect between the resources being provided and then their actual assignments. There appears to be this gap in the prescribed content that they're receiving from the LRW course. and then the tasks that they're being assigned. Another major concern that students have expressed to me is that many are finding the form of communication, it lacks coherency in terms of the fact that they don't feel they're getting enough support throughout the course, i.e. someone to ask questions to, a community or group of peers where they can have some type of academic support and motivation. Lastly, I think that a lack of guidance, this has been brought up in terms of how to complete the assignments, along with the desire for a clear rubric and consistency in regards to marking, which Karmen, you brought up. I personally think that the LOW course, the thing is that you have a lot of students coming from different backgrounds, some of which English is not their first language, and then some, English isn't even their second language, right? And then perhaps they've been trained in different manners using distinct methodologies and techniques. So essentially, they're all starting off at a different basis or a starting point, if you will. And this can be challenging for them, but I anticipate it would also in turn be challenging in terms of devising a uniform course for such a broad spectrum of students. So ultimately what I tried to do, and Karmen, you spoke to this, was I try and communicate that, you know, this course is going to help you throughout, and that it's not going to just help you with your NCA exams, but it's going to help you in your legal career, because lawyers are expected to be self-sufficient. Answers aren't going to just be given to you. You have to constantly put yourself out there and find the answers to your questions, right? So you got to figure it out.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Vanessa. I think it's helpful, especially for Karmen, to take away some more feedback. And Karmen, you'd have an opportunity to talk about or to kind of give a response to some of these things. And maybe more importantly, just take things away so that the process is improved for the students. Idayat, this question is for you. Most of our participants here are either on the NCA journey or they're on the bar exam journey. And so preparation is key. Many people are always wondering, how do we go about this? How do I take the NCA exams? Are there any potential shortcuts, or are there any, you know, what can I do? So Idayat, what's your thought about this?
Well, to begin, there are no shortcuts to success. I like to put that at the beginning, because I know many of us writing the NCAs want to sort of just go to the very easy thing to do, which is great, but we cannot omit that it is important that we really study for these exams. So in terms of preparation, the first thing I always like to say to everyone writing the NCAs, you need to dedicate the time. I know we're doing so many things at the same time. We're working, we're trying to put food on the table, but we really need to dedicate the time to study. Once you have that dedication in, then you must focus on what materials you need to use to study. Well, I think NCA is great in that regard, in terms of they really list out the resources or the materials in your syllabus. Do not ignore your syllabus. The very first 2 pages of your syllabus, I say, are very important. Go through them. It's listed to you, the list of resources, the textbooks, the laws, the case laws. Look at them. And then I know very well that most of the materials are quite voluminous. I know, particularly the textbooks. While you're working, you're taking care of the family, you cannot read the textbooks. Well, I think there are some great materials out there. There are people who are dedicated their time to sort of condense these textbooks in form of notes. You could buy those notes as well and then use it to study. Also very important is in terms of structuring your study. If you go to the syllabus, NCAs had also said to you what they expect of you in the exams. Do not ignore those instructions. For example, I tutor criminal law, and I know for a fact that in the NCA syllabus for the Canadian criminal law, they say to you, we are not going to test you on all of the defenses. Defense is a topic you come to learn. You have to answer questions in your exams, no doubt. NCA had listed the the list of defenses in the criminal code that you will need to come up with, they then also say to you, do not bother reading these XYZ defenses. For example, defense of property. It's something you don't need to read. So if you ignore that and then you delve into the voluminous material and you dedicate your time in reading those defense, particularly the defense of property, you're not going to have that in your exams. What am I saying?
Sorry to jump in there, Idayat, but just on the back of what you're saying, I hear you talk about self-study. I also hear you talk about tutoring. So in about 30 seconds, do you want to just touch on the few options that people have to prepare for these exams?
Totally. So NCA, for example, I know they say you could either self-study or you could go to law school to prepare for your exams. Well, the question you've asked me, Ife, is quite subjective. You really just need to know yourself. You need to know your skill. You need to know your level of assimilation. If you're able to self-study, fantastic. If you're also needing to be in a group of people for support, that's also very great. But I would say do not limit yourself to one way. Say for example, you're self-studying. It's also going to be okay if you sort of check with other people in a sort of group context what they're doing. So you avoid what I call a tunnel vision. So you're able to hear from other people on what they're studying so far is like, and then you can imbibe that to sort of check how far you've gone in your studies. So
absolutely. Thank you.
Subjective.
Yeah, thank you for answering that way, Idayat, because I've been through the process myself and I can relate with every single thing that you said. And one thing to just add would be that, you know, you have to really know yourself. You need to know your style of studying. You need to know what works for you and just go with that. So thanks again, Idayat. My next question is for you, Liran. You work with a lot of students, both on the NCA level, on the bar exam level. What would you say is the most frequently asked question or the biggest concern that most people come to you with?
Thank you.
And what would your typical answer be?
Sure. Thank you for the question. And thank you to ITL Network for putting this together and, of course, for reaching out to me. I'd like to start off by kind of echoing some of the comments that were made earlier, but also adding that the NCA process and the self-study process is intended to be self-study. All of you, and when I say you, I mean NCA candidates, are capable of completing these exams on your own without help. The hard part is over. The hard part was getting into law school and completing law school. The NCA is not meant to be a barrier to entry into the profession. They test minimum competencies that you must demonstrate. And so going back to your question, you know, students can struggle with a variety of issues, some of them perhaps substantive, procedural, about the content of the course, but I think something that I've seen over a decade of being in this space is the writing component. And so I think the NCA, the regulator, has taken the right step in introducing a mandatory course on legal research and writing. CPLED, I think you guys are doing a great job. It's been a couple of years, you know, and I'm sure the program will just get better with time. But it's a necessary program. We need it. And we need it because I'm someone who's studied abroad. I've studied in the UK, and I also studied in law school in Canada. And I see a substantial difference in the writing, particularly. There is a massive difference. And so where students get caught on average, and they get caught with a particular subject and they have to redo it, or they get caught on multiple subjects, the more likely culprit is their writing. Okay, so they need to sit back and think about their writing and what is it they're getting wrong. And so there's, I think, in my view, just a mismatch in expectations of what the North American style of providing answers is versus what you may have learned in law school in various jurisdictions, common law jurisdiction, which a lot are influenced by the UK. And so I'm just going to talk about my experience from the UK. A lot of it was theory-based, but also focused heavily on what the law is, because those exams are closed book, and you had to explain what the law is. Now, on an open book exam, the emphasis is not on the law. Okay, yes, you do need to know what the law is, but it's your demonstration and application of the law in a given set of circumstances. You demonstrate your knowledge of the law through your application. And once you figure out what that means and what it actually means to demonstrate and apply yourself to a given set of facts, then you will clear all your exams without difficulty. Okay.
Liran, I'll ask you a further question now, but I just wanted to, thanks for giving that context, because what you've said now is that there's a mismatch of expectations. In about a minute, do you mind just sharing a few more challenges that you see in terms of candidates wanting to take these exams and you know, the issues that they come with in about a minute?
Yeah, again, I'm going to focus on the writing because I think that's what we're here to, you know,
we're actually here for two things: the writing,
okay,
and then the challenges surrounding the exams.
Absolutely. And again, it's, in my view, it's the writing. You know, if someone is stuck on a particular subject, and I've been in this situation, you know, many times, okay, dozens and dozens of times, people will come to me, they're on their last thread. They're attempting an exam for the 4th time, which is their last attempt through the NCA. It's not their last attempt overall. They can still complete it in law school, but it's a very stressful period of time for them. And yes, there's some substantive issues. Yes, they misunderstood the law in some places, but those are forgivable mistakes on an exam. You can pass an exam even if you get the law wrong, but you will never pass your exam if you are not applying yourself. Okay, if you're not using critical thinking, reasoning, and application on your exam, you could never apply yourself, even if you've got all the law right. Okay, so merely reproducing notes or reproducing the law and saying, look, I've got the law right, you're on an open book exam, it doesn't demonstrate much. Okay, because anyone can take that content and reproduce it. So you really, what's missing in many of these answers is the individual voice, and that voice making those arguments, arguing for certain points or not. So if you can find your voice in your answer, that will really, it will help you greatly, and it will help you in practice as well, because that's how we practice.
Yeah, thank you, Liran. And what I hear you say is that it's important that students focus on the approach. The approach to taking the exam is different from what maybe most of them might be used to. So it's important to know, you know, what's new and approach it in that new way so that you can excel. Thanks for that, Liran. Vanessa, I'll come to you again. And I know that you tutor students on the NCAs and on the bar exams. And there are challenges that outside of the LRW that you have you've encountered with students. So do you want to shed some more light on that so that the participants can learn from that and use that in their work?
For sure. And I just want to say I couldn't agree more with a lot of what Liran said. It really resonated with me, and I really concur. But the bar exams, I mean, they're daunting for many foreign trained students and lawyers. I consider them a different beast than the NCA exams. There's definitely a different approach and strategy involved in tackling the Ontario bar exams because of the sheer amount of volume, right? The volume of information, right? So many students find that they get lost in the details of the materials. Of course, I mean, it's pretty impossible unless you had a photographic memory, to memorize all the content. So I always focus on understanding the information, having coherent comprehension of how the materials fit together in the bigger picture. A major challenge also for bar students is balancing life, work, and studying. And it's hard. I did it, and I definitely wouldn't want to go through it again. I was a new mom, single mom, balancing working and writing the bar exams, and it was tough. So I commend all the students going through the process. did you want me to speak to the...
Right. So thank you for talking about the bar exams. You could talk about the NCAs as well. I wanted to give you about, say, 3 minutes to talk about the challenges for students taking the NCAs and challenges for students taking the bar as well. So you've got about 2 more minutes.
Okay, so with the NCA exam, so I'm probably going to be saying a lot of things that Liran might have commented on, but students are directed to the NCA syllabus for each subject, where they're going to find those prescribed textbooks. Essentially, the NCA exams are self-study examinations, right? But this being said, I do find a lot of students require or desire that extra support because they're accustomed to learning in a classroom setting with a teacher or instructor. They're familiar with someone who can answer their questions, fill in those knowledge gaps. Overall, I think that this is perhaps the most challenging aspect of the exam, or one of them for a lot of students. The notion that they're told, okay, here's the textbook, now go study, right? But it's a double-edged sword, so to speak, because it is this very task of being independent and studying, researching, learning on your own that is a paramount trait and skill that a lawyer must have. So in one breath, students are overwhelmed by not having someone guide them through the course. But at the same time, I think that they eventually learn to appreciate the role of independence necessary in the process and the learned skill of self-sufficiency. I've had quite a few students who've approached me who haven't passed or cleared an exam. And once again, like I think Liran was pretty on point. I actually have found that if it isn't due to a lack of knowledge of the course content, which may be because they didn't invest in the proper resources or they thoroughly didn't understand the information, then it's often partly due to their ability to relay or convey the message that they're trying to get across to the exam marker. So in other words, their answer isn't coherent, structured, they aren't addressing the issue of the problem or properly applying the law to the facts. And this goes back to why the LRW course is so critical and important. It enhances the overall learning process during the whole overall learning experience during the NCA process, and it assists students not just with the NCA exams, but it will do wonders for their legal career as well. So my advice to students who haven't passed an exam is to assess what they're using for studying purposes, examine the feedback memo to understand where they may be lacking. Maybe it's in their analysis, or perhaps they're having trouble identifying an issue. And then if necessary, seek out external assistance, such as tutoring services.
Right. Thank you, Vanessa. And I think it would be very interesting to know after maybe a couple of years to understand, to see data on how many students are able to pass now taking the LRW course, comparing that to what it was previously. I think it would be very helpful. Certainly, there are many challenges. I had my challenges, and I would say that the challenges for me were more about the timing, just having to juggle work, family, and all of that. So certainly, it's a whole lot. Idayat, I would like to ask you, there are many students who were not in a common law jurisdiction. They've moved to Canada, but they were not in a common law jurisdiction. They didn't practice law in a common law jurisdiction. So some people talk about how challenging that is, and I would like for you to shed more light on that. Have you experienced students who had that challenge, and what was it like?
Thank you very much, Ife. We know for sure that Canada is dual legal system in terms we have common law and then we have civil law, right? We do have students, like you've said, who've come from the civil law jurisdiction, and yes, they face all of the challenges that all of the students from the common law jurisdictions will face. But one additional challenge for the civil law, NCA students from the civil law jurisdiction is the fact that they have different approach to how they would answer their questions from their jurisdiction. With civil law, you know for sure, the major source of law for them is statute, right? When we talk about common law, you're talking about stare decisis, you're talking about judicial precedent, you're talking about case laws. So now you have somebody who've come from the civil law jurisdiction who had to primarily relate to statute as their major source of law. And then they have to now write an exam in the context of the Canadian legal system that has a combination of common law and civil law. I'm mentioning civil law because we know for sure Quebec is civil law based. So now you have to write an exam in this context. You've come in from the civil law jurisdiction. You ask yourself, how do I do this? How do I do this? I mean, it's daunting because for sure the style of answering their questions is different. If you're talking about common law jurisdiction, you need to understand that you will be referring to case laws. You need to be attentive to the legal system in terms of the hierarchy of courts. All of that is novel to someone from a civil law jurisdiction. So they really, really need to sort of do double work that someone would come from a common law jurisdiction would have to do. It's a major challenge, but like we've all rightly said on this during this event so far, it's not, we can overcome it. It's not so terrible. What you just basically need to do is dedicate the time, as I've stated before, understand that you're now in a different jurisdiction. You need to be very attentive to that sharp difference and just dedicate time to it, understand it, go back to your syllabus, as Vanessa had said, you know, be attentive to your analytical reasoning, like Liran had said, and you will be good. You will be good. And if you do need help, seek the help. People are there to support you.
Great. Thanks, Idayat, for that. Very quick one, Liran, about 30 seconds to a minute. I know you've interacted with students who have failed multiple times, and that is really tough, right? I have seen people, I've heard of people who have failed multiple times, and they're dealing with the emotions of it, dealing with trying to push forward. So what are your thoughts on that in about a minute?
Well, it's challenging. In a way, I've also become a therapist, which is interesting. It's nice to have a sounding board and someone to sound your ideas off. But in terms of correcting those issues, there's a very simple solution, and it's not a secret. I'm not going to keep it from you. So the way to correct your writing, or to look at, sample answers or sample writing that everyone's always searching for, which you'll see is not on our website. We don't sell those things, and there's a reason for it. But there is no better sample answer than a Supreme Court decision. And very few students actually bother to read a decision from beginning to end. A Supreme Court decision will show you the style and structure of the writing that's expected on the exam. It is written in the IRAC format. Of course, there are some nuances in what you're expected to do on an open book exam versus a Supreme Court decision, and perhaps I'll just touch on that very quickly. Obviously, when the Supreme Court is writing a decision, they're usually setting some sort of precedent, and so they'll focus a lot on the law, and you have to be careful about doing that on an open book exam. Right, you set out the law as quickly as you can. Okay, that part is not as important as the application or analysis section, and so that's where your emphasis in your reading should be. On a Supreme Court decision, look at those major cases, the major tests. You should read them from start to finish, and that is your sample answer. And one more quick little trick: sometimes examiners will choose a case, okay, when they're writing their exam, okay? So they'll take a case that's not on the syllabus, they'll slightly revise the facts, and that's going to be your exam question. Right. The reason is they've already got a sample answer to grade you against. And so, use that to your benefit, use the Supreme Court cases and actually read some cases. I'm not saying you have to read every single case from start to finish, but the sample answers are out there, okay?
Right. Thank you, Liran. And I think the key thing there is not being lazy and taking the time to go through Supreme Court decisions, because it helps you to understand the style of writing and what is expected of you. Thank you. Vanessa, do you have any quick tips on, for people who have failed multiple times in about a minute?
Yeah, so I think I actually said some of them earlier. I think I went over a couple things. One thing is, obviously you're given a feedback memo. So use that to your advantage. See where your gaps were. See what the exam marker is stating to you. Did you miss out on identifying the issue of the problem? Did you not engage in a thorough analysis? And it's really funny because I also, and in my classes, I will use a Supreme Court decision and tell the students, look, issue, rules, it's all there for you, right? It is an amazing, it's a prime example, as Liran said. And so once again, like, you're given a feedback memo, analyze that, dissect it, see where you've gone wrong. It's an open book exam. So yes, you have all the information at your fingertips, right? And students will sometimes say to me, but I wrote down all the rules. I gave them all the information. And I'll respond, but anybody can do that, right? That all you had to do was buy a textbook or the notes. How did you apply that? Did you engage in applying the law to the specific facts of the case? And the issue with some frameworks that are on the market is that students will just copy and paste in a framework, and that's not good enough, because a framework is an overarching approach that isn't going to take into account of the nuances or the specifications of the question. And it's going to be, and exam markers are aware students are using this, and they can fairly quickly pick up on it. And a lot of the time what students will have in their feedback memo is, you can't use a boiler template.
Right.
Just a framework is not going to work.
Thank you, Vanessa. And what I hear you say on that is ensuring that people look at the feedback that they get if they fail an exam and learn from that. And also you buttressed what Liran had said, which is use the IRAC, use the Supreme Court decisions. Very good. Deborah, very quick one. Do you have any top tips for passing the NCA exams that you would just like to mention for the participants in about a minute?
Oh, I could do 40 minutes on tips. I would say take them seriously. Don't write it if you're not ready. That you have the option to cancel at the last minute, well, before midnight of the day that you're going to write your exam. Make sure that you go in and do the practice session. Make sure that you're familiar with the online platform. Please read the syllabus, buy the textbooks. Trust your, what materials we have provided you. Use the sample exam that's there, but don't think that your exam is going to be exactly the same as the sample exam. It will not. Every exam is unique. There's obviously going to be themes. Think about what's going on in your life. Pull down the schedule for 2024 and make a plan. I'm going to do this one this month, this one this month. Think about what else is going on in your life. Are you running a half marathon? Are you really busy at work in April? All of those types of things that you need to think about. Make sure that your typing is on point. If you need to do a refresher on how to type, please do it. You can adjust the font in our system, on the online system. So if you need it to be a bit bigger so that you can more easily read it, do it. And follow the instructions of the proctor. Do not have your exam disqualified because you ignored the proctor. Was that about a minute?
Yeah, you did great. And honestly, I think those are really great tips that everyone can take away and run with. Karmen, do you have any quick tips for the participants on succeeding with the LRW course?
Well, I think I'm going to echo Liran's great words. Find your voice in your analysis. Dig deep as opposed to cutting and pasting and just reiterating what you're finding in your research. If language proficiency is something that the NCA has told you that you need to deal with, you don't have to do that before LRW. However, you might want to consider that before you take the LRW course.
Great, thank you, that's great, thank you, Karmen. We have questions in the Q&A and we only have about 10 more minutes. So one thing I would say to the participants is keep your questions coming. For questions that we cannot answer here, the ITL network will ensure that messages are sent to you. Just put your names so that they know who sent it and they can answer your questions. I also see that Vanessa has answered a couple of questions in the chat, and I think that's great. Someone says that I have a query related to the ITL program. If a student has completed the ITLP program successfully at one of the universities mentioned on the NCA website, would they be exempted from passing the NCA exams? If yes, would this exemption apply to all universities or only to the one mentioned on the website? I think this question is for Deborah.
Yes. So the policy requires that before you take a course at a university to meet your assigned requirements, you must seek the approval of the NCA. And we do that in order to protect ourselves and to protect you. We don't want you taking an advanced criminal procedure course expecting to get exemption from the criminal law exam. So there are courses that we have pre-approved at many of the Canadian law schools, but you need to email nca@flsc.ca and ask for approval. Doing one of the LLMs that's listed will not excuse you from going through the NCA. It just gives you an opportunity to complete your assigned requirements through the school rather than through the NCA. And just let me say one other thing, I'm going to before I hand it back. Please go to nca.legal, our website. Almost everything that you need to know is there. Please go there.
Right. Thank you, Deborah, for that. Someone says this question is for Deborah, but I doubt that it is because it's a by-exam question, but you might be able to help. If I have practiced as a lawyer in a common law jurisdiction for less than 10 months, can I apply for a reduction in the length of articling?
So as I said at the beginning, sometimes people confuse the role of the NCA with the role of the law societies. Articling is a law society responsibility as part of the licensing or bar admissions process. So that question needs to go to the law society in the province or territory where you want to practice.
Great, thank you. Someone says, why do we have just 30 days to appeal our assessment? There are times one doesn't know how to appeal. What can one do?
Well, the rules for appealing are on our website and in our policy. So if you are unhappy with your assessment or disagree with it, now disagree with the way we've assessed your file. If you're unhappy with the policy, that's not an appeal process. But everything is on the, as I said, on the website or in the policy, and the policy is on the website under the resources tab. The reason why there's a limit, there's always a limit to appeal. Think about the court system. There's always a limit to appeal, and the 30 days is pretty typical.
Right.
You can always, but even if it's after the 30 days, you can still ask questions. You can always say, please explain this to me, or why did I get this assessment?
Yeah, I'm sure that's very helpful for people to know. Another question, can I take other exams not required by the NCA? So this person is asking if they can take exams that have not been assessed by the NCA.
Absolutely. If you have not been assigned, let's say, family law, but you know that you are going to want to practice family law, just ask us. We will allow you to do that. And if you fail it, we won't require you to clear that failure before you get your certificate. You can also do that after you've earned your certificate. You can always come back and say, hey, I want to take evidence. I need that. I see I need it in my practice. However, you might not actually want to go through the process of the exam. Just download the syllabus and learn it on your own.
Exactly. I remember a lawyer saying to me as a young lawyer that a good lawyer is not one who knows all the law, but one who knows where to find it. So, yeah, another question. I did ask, but my appeal wasn't looked into. It was a mistake from my school. I don't know what the context is to that question, but
I mean, I can't answer questions about. I can't answer questions about specific people's issues, but they need to email nca@flsc.ca.
I just wanted to make a quick comment. When you spoke about, let's say a student, because I've had students who they'll get, let's say they're assigned a couple of electives. They have to take 2 electives out of 4, let's just say, for example, right? And then they'll say, oh, I took civil, but I didn't want to take it, and now I actually want to take family. I just want to reiterate, and Deborah, you can also do the same, is that in that situation, if you do take civil, you have to clear it, right? Okay.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, thanks for clarifying that, Vanessa. When I said if you're taking an exam just for fun, and you'd fail it, then we don't have to clear it. But if you have chosen an optional subject and you fail that optional subject, you must clear that subject before we will give you your CQ. It's said, we say that on the website, we say it on our assessment report, and we say it in the exam results. So please, please, please don't work your way through your 4 optional subjects. Take the exam, clear it.
I've seen people do that.
Thank you very much, Deborah. Thank you to the entire team. It's been great moderating this great event that's useful for so many participants. I'm grateful, and I'll pass this over to Funto.
Thank you, everyone, for attending, and thank you to the panelists. It's been an educative and enlightening time. I'd like to call Kenny up to give a vote of thanks on behalf of the ITL network, so that we can round up on time and get all of you out to the rest of your Saturdays.
All right, yeah, thanks, Funto, and thanks everyone for joining us today. There's no gainsaying the fact that the ITL process is a process that's very uncertain and requires a bit of guidance. So we really appreciate you all coming out today, taking the time out of your busy schedules to really share from your word of experience and your word of knowledge. I'd like to thank everyone that has contributed to making this event a success. The event planning team, our team of volunteers, thank you all. We couldn't have done this without you. All our panelists, thank you for taking out the time out of your busy schedules. We really, really appreciate you doing this. I'm pretty sure our participants today, they are living, in a better way, and they've learned a great deal about the NCA process. Thanks, Karmen and Deborah, for also providing insights into the LRW course. The interesting thing is the CPLED reached out to me when they were about to pilot the LRW course, and they asked me, as a former NCA candidate, am I interested in, sort of going through the course to provide my feedback? I didn't have to do it. I was like, yes, why not? I mean, because the opportunity to learn and write better is always a good deal. And I can tell you, even in practice right now, you can't succeed if you can't write decently, or even maybe make an opinion about something. Even if you know what you want to do, if you can't communicate in writing, people are going to believe you don't know what you're saying. So I really appreciate you guys coming out today to really shed some light on that. My vote of thanks isn't complete without appreciating our attendees today. Thank you also for joining us. And on behalf of the ITL Network Board, I hope you all have a great weekend. Bye for now.